Hello and welcome to another edition of RHOX Garage. I'm your host Kevin. On this episode we're going to show you how to install a custom dash, part number DASH-0005A, on this 2010 Club Car DS. Now before we get started, we want to show you what's included with your custom dash, as well as the tools necessary to perform the installation. Now here's a look at what's included with your custom dash. You'll receive the dash itself, as well as 4 cup holders and all necessary mounting hardware, as well as keys for your locking compartments. Now our dash has a carbon fiber finish. It's also available in a wood grain finish, and the installation is the same for both dashes. Now we're going to show you the tools necessary to perform the installation. Now here's a look at the tools that we'll be using to install our custom dash. First up, we have a rubber mallet, followed by a ratchet with a short extension and a 15/16 socket, 14mm wrench, flathead screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, an 1/8 inch drill bit, a 9/64 inch drill bit, and a cordless drill. Now that we've shown you the tools that we'll be using, we're ready to begin the installation of our custom dash. Now before we can begin installing our dash, we first need to disconnect our power supply. Now since we're using a gas cart, we simply need to disconnect our 12-volt battery. Now if you're using an electric, what you want to do is make sure your tow run switch is in the tow position, and then once you've done that, you want to disconnect your battery packs. After your power source has been disconnected, we can then begin installing our dash. Now that we have our power source disconnected, the next thing we need to do is to remove the steering wheel cover. Now in order to do this, we need to locate the 2 Phillips head screws on the back side of the steering wheel and remove them. Once they've been removed, we need to pry the steering wheel cover up and away from the steering wheel. This will expose the one nut that secures the steering wheel to the steering column. Once you have the steering wheel cover removed, you're going to want to retain it, as well as the 2 Phillips head screws that we've removed. Once we have the steering wheel cover removed, we're going to need to grab a 15/16 socket in order to remove the nut that secures the steering wheel in place. Once the nut has been removed, you may need a rubber mallet to tap the back side of the steering wheel to get it loose and off of the steering column. Once you've removed the steering wheel, we're going to want to retain the steering wheel as well as the nut that secures it in place, as they will be reinstalled later on in the process. Now our next step is to remove the factory dash panel. Now before we do this, if you left your key in the ignition, you want to make sure that you remove your key. Once you've done that, we're going to remove the 2 caps on the ends of the dash panel using a flathead screwdriver. These will expose Phillips head screws. Once you remove those, we'll be able to pry the dash panel away from the dash. Now at this time, we want to disconnect the wires that are going to our oil light, or if it's an electric cart, your battery light. And then we're also going to want to disconnect all of our wires going to our ignition switch. Now make sure you make note of how the wires connect to the ignition switch so that they can be reconnected properly later on. Once removed, we're then going to remove the battery light, or oil light in our case, and the ignition switch from the factory dash panel. Now in order to remove your battery or oil light, you just want to depress the tabs on the side of the light and push it through the hole. Now as far as the key switch goes, you want to depress the tabs that are securing the ring around the front of the key switch. That'll come out, and once you do that, there will be a retaining nut on the inside that you'll remove with a pair of pliers. Once you remove that, the ignition switch will slide out the back of the factory dash panel. Once you have removed your ignition switch as well as your battery light or oil light, you want to set them off to the side for the time being. So now in order for our ignition wires to reach the new ignition switch location, we need to extend the ground wire going to the chassis of the cart, as well as the ground wire that's connected to the backup buzzer. Now that we have our ground wire extended, we should be able to plug in the backup buzzer side of the ground wire, feed all of our wires to the factory location, and reinstall the factory dash panel. Once the dash panel is reinstalled, we can then reinstall the screws that we removed earlier and then replace the caps that cover the Phillips head screws. Now the next thing we want to do is to drill out pilot holes in our new dash panel. Now to do this, we're going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit and drill into the marked locations that are already on the dash panel. Now that we've drilled all of the pilot holes in our new dash, we're going to install it over the steering column and let it rest on the steering column at this time while we reinstall the indicator light and the original ignition switch. And once you have your wires properly reconnected to your ignition switch, you want to route the 2 wires that go to your indicator light through the square hole on the new dash. Once you have the wires routed through the hole, you can simply slide the spade connectors onto your indicator light, and then you'll be able to press the indicator light into the dash opening. Now once you have the indicator light installed, we're going to install the ignition switch through the back side of the dash in the hole located just below the indicator light. Now we only need to press it through just far enough so that we can get our retaining nut installed on our ignition switch. Now once you have the retaining nut loosely installed, you can go back through using a 1-inch socket and tighten it down till it's just a little bit snug. You don't want to over tighten it, as you could possibly damage the dash panel by doing so. Now once you have your ignition switch secure on the new dash, the next thing we need to do is to reconnect the battery. Once you've done this, you just want to verify all the functions of the cart before we secure the dash panel in place. Once you've verified your cart is functioning properly, we're ready for the next step, which is to secure our custom dash panel in place. Now at this time, we want to align our dash in a position where we're going to have it mounted permanently. Once we've done this, we're going to drill through our pilot holes and into the dash itself. Now, there's no real wrong way to do this. You could always drill your holes all the way along the dash and then come back and install your screws. However, what I'm going to do is drill the holes on the outsides of the dash and install my screws there first, and then come back through and drill out all the holes on the top and bottom of the dash. Now, it's important to note that when you're installing the screws into the dash, to use a hand screwdriver instead of a power tool, as if you over tighten the screw, you could potentially strip out the hole that you just drilled into your dash. Now at this time, we're going to install the 4 included cup holders. Now in order to do this, we're going to take the ridges that are on the cup holder, line those up with the notches that are in the dash panel, and we'll drop the cup holder into place. Once the cup holder has been installed, you can then rotate the cup holder so that the notches and ridges will not be aligned anymore, and this will lock the cup holder in place. Now our next step is to reinstall our steering wheel and steering wheel cover. Now in order to do this, we're going to first take the steering wheel and place it back over the steering column. We'll then reattach it using the factory retaining nut. Once we've secured the steering wheel, we'll then reinstall the cover by snapping it into place and then securing it from the backside using the original 2 Phillips head screws. Now that we have our steering wheel reinstalled, that'll wrap up the installation of our custom dash part number DASH-0005A on this 2010 Club Car DS. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.